Welcome to We on Five Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 5, episode number 6, and yeah, we here at the weekend, man. I hope you guys had a great week. I know we all go through the hustle and bustle during the week. Hope you guys are able to let your head down a little bit this weekend and enjoy what we got across the sporting landscape. If it's your first time listening, We on Five Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide our five takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if you're OG of the show, I appreciate the check-in once again as we're moseying along through the month of September. And we really here in the fall. Fall really jumps off the sporting landscape. We got the National Football League going into week number 3. It's been some exciting situations, man, across the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. Know you guys was able to enjoy what we saw last night. You know, the Buffalo Bills taking on the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins came into the game 0-2 on the season. There's been a lot of talk about Mike McDaniel, head coach of the Miami Dolphins, being on the hot seat. You know, for me, the Dolphins, they put up a good fight last night. You know, they was in the ball game. They covered the spread. You know, if you had money out there on it, you know, just the big time interception, man, really costing the game. The penalty on the punt situation really gave the Buffalo Bills new life, and they was able to score off that possession. And Buffalo rolling now, man, 3-0 in the season. You know, they looking like the best team in football through the first 3 weeks of the year. You know, for Miami, as I mentioned, you know, Mike McDaniel, a lot of people saying that he's on the hot seat, and I think that seat is definitely getting hot. You know, he spoke on it last night as far as, you know, not accepting a moral victory. I mean, it's the National Football League. You get paid to win games. And so, you know, the moral victory, you know, stuff is really more so in college football on high school level. But in the pros, man, especially when you 0-4 on the season, you're trying to get that first W, man. And that's what it's all about. You know, but they gave a valiant effort, you know, to the Dolphins with, you know, Tua making mistakes. You know, Tua, he's really a good quarterback, but he's limited. And when you talk about the top tier quarterbacks in the league, you know, he's a little bit limited. You know, he's not the most fastest guy out of the pocket. You know, he's a guy that we all know have had some big time head injuries, and in his arm, good accurate arm, good timing arm, but, you know, he doesn't have, you know, a rocket cannon back there. And so the Miami Dolphins, they got to figure it out. And, you know, people talk about Mike McDaniel, but to me, the real culprit is Chris Greer, the general manager of the Miami Dolphins. They just spent a lot of money down there in South Beach. You know, over $200+ million to tour. You know, Tyreek Hill, you know, you broke him off a bag. We've known the situation with Tyreek Hill since he's been in Miami. You know, it's been up and down, you know, off the field stuff, on the field stuff. You know, last night he caught a touchdown, man. Seems like, you know, he was a little bit engaged into the game, but you know, to the victor goes the spoils. In Buffalo now, they 3-0, another divisional win for them, able to handle that business. So, you know, that, you know, and also too, I got week number 3 preview coming up. I'm gonna break down the whole week number 3 landscape in the National Football League. That'll be coming up shortly. And also, we got some other news across the National Football League, really on the injury tip, you know, as before we preview the games. You know, looks like Mac Jones going to start once again for the San Francisco 49ers as Brock Purdy. You know, he's going to sit this one out. You know, he's got a few little nagging injuries, shoulder, foot injury that he has, and looks like he's going to miss week number 3. Jaden Daniels has been ruled out on Sunday. He's not going to play. You know, that's a nice blow to the Washington Commanders, because I think that they're a team, you know, last year they was, you know, last year's favorite. And, you know, this year, you know, you got to earn your keep in the National Football League. You know, I think it's a good football club, but they've already experienced the injury of Austin Eckler. He's out for the year. You know, now with McDaniel, you know, with McDaniels, you know, Daniels going to be out, you know, for this week. And so just because you was good last year don't mean you're going to be good this year, man. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the Washington Commanders and just kind of seeing if they're able to rally the troops, you know, win this game on Sunday, as Marcus Mariota will be the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders. Also, we can't forget about these WNBA playoffs. These WNBA playoffs is jumping off. You know, shout out to the ladies. You know, shout out also to Fee Collier, and also, you know, my girl, man, Aja Wilson. You know, I think they're the best 2 players in the sport. and rightfully so. They have been named, MVP finalists. I think it's, Arjus Wilson's the lose per se. The Aces have had an outstanding year so far this year. So, it's gonna go down, man, in the WNBA, man. It's what I call, almost a witching hour for some of these teams, as we move along in the WNBA season. We got Major League Baseball now. We in the home stretch of the season. Congratulations to my Chicago Cubs being able to clinch a playoff spot. First time in 5 years for my Cubbies. We'll see what we do in the playoffs, coming up in MLB, wild card style, because, the Brewers got the division on lock. But, I'll break that all down, man, next week as things heat up in Major League Baseball. But, we got a tilt tonight, man. The Liberty taking on the Mercury tonight. Winner take all game number 3. The Liberty, last year's WNBA champions, they on the brink. Let's see if Stewie will be able to kind of hold off the Phoenix Mercury. I think it's going to be a good matchup. So I will be checking that out. That's going to jump off, man, at 9 Eastern time. So, I'll be checking that, that nice little jump off, between those two squads. And so, as I mentioned, things are heating up, man, across the National Football League. WNBA is in the playoffs. MLB is stretching along into the playoff, picture with their little situation that they got going on. Also, we got some NBA news. We hadn't talked to NBA, man, since the summertime. Since, we seen the Oklahoma City Thunder finally win an NBA championship. Congratulations to them. And looks like this whole saga with Jonathan Kuminga and the Golden State Warriors looks like it's going to come to an end. Word on the street is that Jonathan Kuminga is going to sign a qualifying offer from the Golden State Warriors and rejoin the team. He's not going to go back as a happy camper. He was expected to, get some money out here, man, in free agency, but things have changed a little bit. You got the, luxury tax, the second apron team, especially the Golden State Warriors. I mean, in my opinion, they literally made the rule up for the Golden State Warriors. And so I knew they was going to be protecting their coins a little bit. And, we seen it with a few other guys. My man Josh Giddey up in Chicago, signed a 4-year, $100 million deal with my Chicago Bulls. And, those were two guys. They were kind of the last of the Mohicans on the free agent front. And it looks like both of them took a haircut as what they thought they were going to get on the open market. But teams weren't spending bread like that this summer in the NBA. Especially for guys who I consider not superstar caliber type of guys. But we'll see what that do, but I thought that was very interesting. That looks like that saga was going to come to an end. He still may be traded next season at some point. I'm thinking that's probably was going to be inevitable unless Steve Kerr is able to mend that relationship. So we'll see what that do. We'll get into that as NBA jumps off in October. We got NBC freshly minted back into the fold of the NBA universe. I'm loving the little roster they putting together. Got my man MJ coming through, Mr. Michael Jeffrey Jordan as a contributor. We got I seen Carmelo Anthony on the slate. Reggie Miller on the slate. Shout out to Jamal Crawford on the slate. So they got a nice little lineup. We'll see what they do. But we'll get into that, man, as we get a little closer to the NBA season. But coming up, I'm going to break down week number 3 in the National Football League. Previews of the games we got across the slate. Also, before I get out of here, I got a Big 5. I got another Big 5 jumping off. But this Big 5 got a little twist to it, a little sauce on it, man. We're going to do Big 5, the top 5 NFL quarterbacks I have through week number 3 of the NFL season. So I got that on the back end of the slate here. First and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on 5 Sports Podcast. The spot. Welcome back. And we're going to get into week number 3 across the National Football League. Now we on our 3rd week of this season. Things are moving on along since the season has started. And we got some teams across the NFL that's 2-0. We got some teams that's 0-2. We got some teams that's right at 500 trying to bounce back. And I think that's pretty much the theme of week number 3 just kind of as a whole. I think that some teams who are 2-0, some people consider them kind of fool's gold a little bit. And some teams who are 0-2, most people think it's going to be brighter days for them. And so we're going to get right into the slate. And the first game I'm going to talk about is actually 2 teams on both sides of the pendulum. This game will be played at 1 o'clock on Fox. Game played up in Cleveland, Ohio. The Cleveland Browns taking on the Green Bay Packers. Packers coming to this game 2-0. Obviously, the Browns, they 0-2 so far in their season. The Packers have been the talk of September so far. They've been the talk of the early part of the NFL season so far. They brought in Micah Parsons. Looks like his effect has been immediate for this football team. Not more so or less about the production of Micah Parsons, but more so just is giving his team energy on the defensive side of the ball. The offense side of the ball is Jordan Love. He's been playing mistake-free and clean football. Seems like this guy through the first 2 weeks ain't been touched at all. His jersey looked the same as the game began. So, for me, it's interesting for the Packers when they got an opportunity to go 3-0 in the season. They had two kind of contender-laden type of fights or type of games through the first 2 weeks of the season. And the Browns, it's not a lot to expect from the Cleveland Browns. They just took an L to the Baltimore Ravens last week. Joe Flacco, he gonna chuck that thing whenever in doubt. Joe gonna throw the football, but he gonna turn over the football. And I think it's a test for the Green Bay Packers to be able to capitalize off the turnovers. I think that's going to be inevitable in this game. I think the Packers, they're going to try to run the football a little bit on the Cleveland Browns, but Cleveland, even though they 0-2, they've been kind of stout against the run. They held Derrick Henry to under 30 yards last week, even though they got blew out. So, this is a team with Myles Garrett, who I believe is the best defensive player in all of football. Is that they stout up front. They front forwards, pretty stout, and they're able to get to the quarterback. It just seemed like this team, for some reason or not, just can't pull it off. I got the Packers in this one, man. This team is rolling right now, especially, taking on a team like Cleveland. It could be upset alert, especially with this game being played in Cleveland. As I mentioned, Joe Flacco, man, he's throwing the ball down the football field. If he's able to limit the turnovers, I think this could be a competitive game. The game against the Baltimore Ravens was a competitive game until, Flacco started turning that rock over and things changed very quickly. So it could be competitive for a nice little stretch of the game, but I got the Green Bay Packers pulling this one off. Moving on, man, to 3-0 on the season. I'll go ahead and throw a score out there, man. I think the Packers win this game 31-14 Packers just in this one. Another game we got coming down the slate, these two teams. This is the battle of who going to bounce back from having a hurt quarterback. And that's the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Both these quarterbacks are out. They're starters. Joe Burrow's out. Looks like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. 3 months is looking like with the turf toe situation. Then we got J.J. McCarthy. He's going to be out. And congratulations to the J.J. McCarthy, man. He just had a kid, man. So congratulations to him. Finally getting an opportunity to get his worth in the National Football League after coming off an injury-laden season last year. Was out the whole season. So looks like he's going to be out at least about 2 weeks. So it's the battle of the backup quarterbacks. Browning, for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think he's a guy that has been in the fold for a minute. You know what you get out of him. I think that the offense is not going to be the same without Joe Burrow, but they at least got a guy that's, in a situation of where he's been in the program. He knows the offense. He's gotten some games under his belt when Joe Burrow had the wrist injury 2 years ago. So we know what we can kind of get from Browning just on that tip, even though last week he had a couple turnovers last week. So we'll see what it do. This game be played up in Minnesota and Minneapolis. I actually have the Cincinnati Bengals pulling this one off. Also, another key injury, too, is that, they missing their starting running back, talking about the Minnesota Vikings, man. And so, I just think that for them, Jordan Mason's going to slide right on in, man. I think he'll be able to run the football a little bit. But I just think that the Bengals, this is a team who's 2-0 in the season. I think that they're going to try to rally the troops, especially going on the road for their first opportunity without Joe Burrow. And, I just think that, with Aaron being out, Aaron Jones being out for the Minnesota Vikings, Mason will be able to come in a little bit. But I do think you're missing your starting quarterback and your starting running back. I think Cincinnati will be able to kind of pull this one off in a very close competitive game. I have the Cincinnati Bengals winning this game 17-14, Minnesota pulling off the upset up in Minneapolis. Then a game that is very interesting to me in this 1 o'clock window, man. This game also to be played on Fox. This game will be played up in Philadelphia. We got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Those who all know last season, it ain't been that long ago, in the divisional round, these two teams locked horns. And the Los Angeles Rams was one play away from knocking off the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Matt Stafford had a guy open, but shout out to Jalen Carter being able to, rush the quarterback, and they fell up short in that game, the Los Angeles Rams, and this could sneaky be the game of the week. Stafford, he had a lot of, injury-laden talk around him, man, going up in the training camp leading up into the season. But Stafford, he's played well so far this season, man. He's looking like the old Matt Stafford. I think that the Rams, Puka Nakua's looking good. You got Devontae Adams now in the fold. He's fresh off, good game for the Los Angeles Rams. The Eagles, this is a team that love winning ugly. That's just their whole mantra, meaning they can blow you out or they can, beat you in, just a tight type of game. We saw that, when they went up to Arrowhead and knocked off the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to give respect to the world champions. They playing at home. I think this game is going to be a nail-biter as well. I think this game can come down potentially to the final score of the game. Whoever get the ball last, and I think it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles with the ball control offense for Saquon Barkley. I do think we'll see a little bit more A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in this game with Jalen Hurts being, throwing the football. I think the Philadelphia Eagles defense is getting better by the week. And so I just think that they just got too much right now for the Los Angeles Rams. But the Rams could be a sneaky team, man, in the NFC West and also, too, in the NFC in the playoff picture kind of down the road a little bit. But I got the Eagles in this one. I think this game is going to be 28-24. I got the Eagles up in this boy. And also, too, that'll make the Eagles cover the spread. Looks like it's going to be 3.5 on that game, too, by the way. Next game, man, coming up that we're going to talk about in week number 3 is the game, and we're going to take it out to the West Coast on this one, man. This game in the AFC West between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, coming into this game, both teams easily can be 2-0. The Broncos, they just let go of the rope against the Indianapolis Colts. They got hustled into a loss, man, up in Indianapolis last week. They coming into this game 1-1. You got the Los Angeles Chargers fresh off they win against the Raiders last Monday night. And so the Chargers is my team that I feel to win the AFC West. I went ahead and put it on out there, man. And don't forget also, too, while we on the subject of that, man, check your boy out, too, man, on the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, man. I'm falling through Football in America segment as I, give my little expertise, what I feel across the National Football League. So, I'll definitely be appearing on there. You can check it out on at 5box 2300. Now, I was on there most recently, man, on the episode on there, man, just giving out that knowledge and kicking game, man. So I appreciate my man E. Salim, Mr. Taylor Street, and also, too, Mako Scott, the Mad Russian, just on that love. But back to the Chargers. This is a team that I feel like Jim Harbaugh, everywhere he goes, this man wins. You can love him or hate him. Now, I know, Jimbo, I'm old school enough to remember when Harbaugh was at the University of Michigan as a starting quarterback for Michigan. Then seen him get drafted by my Chicago Bears. For me, his team gets better with time like fine wine. Justin Herbert came off the blocks in the first couple of weeks of this season. I do think that the Chargers want to really kind of get back to trying to run the ball a little bit more. Mario Hampton had a so-so game, not really a game that most people feel, being the first round draft pick and running back for the Chargers. Many people expect him to have more production. So far through the first couple of weeks of the season. And, I just think that, they're balanced. Looks like Khalil Mack is going to be out of this game. On the other side of it is the Denver Broncos. This is a team with Sean Payton. A lot of people feel this team is creeping on the come up. They made the playoffs last season. Bo Nix in his sophomore season for the Broncos. This is a team that paid that big bag of money to Cortland Sutton. He's been kind of, on a milk carton the first couple of weeks of the season. It's also a team with a youngin in the backfield, R.J. Harvey. He's been, all right so far. But I think that Denver, they had a, nice little loss, just for them being 1-1 coming into this game. And I think for the Chargers, man, they see the pot of gold. Meaning that you got KC 0-2 and the Chargers in this game. If they able to, knock off the Broncos and get themselves to 3-0, they got a nice little situation going on, man, in the AFC West. And as I predict, I think that they'll win the AFC West. I think that this might be the best watched game this week, sneaky, man, in week number 3 for me, because I think that both these defenses are going to try to come to play. Like I said earlier, Khalil Mack, he's out of this game. On the other side, you got Patrick Surtain trying to, lock down just, whether it be Ladd McConkey, who's a little nicked up right now, whether it be the resurgence of Keenan Allen. And so, Quentin Johnston has been having an outstanding season so far for the Chargers. So this is going to be an interesting tilt. This is going to be tough, man, because this game's been played, out in Los Angeles, in Inglewood at SoFi Stadium. I'm going to go with the home team in this one, man. I got the Chargers in this football game. Like I said, I think this is going to be the best watch game in week number 3. I got it 27-24 Chargers. I think the Chargers win this game in a last-second field goal situation for them as the Chargers move on to 3-0 on the season. So definitely going to be watching that one. Man, I can't preview week number 3 without talking about the 425 slate on Fox. This game will be played at Soldier Field right off of Lakeshore Drive. And yeah, I'm talking about my Chicago Bears taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Bears coming to this week 3 must-win situation for my Chicago Bears. We 0-2 on the year. Cowboys come in 1-1 on the year. Cowboys had a nice little win last week against the New York Giants. Giants almost pulled it off. Russell Wilson, man, looking like old Russell Wilson. Cowboys able to win last week, man, in overtime. But let me talk about my Bears a little bit for a minute, because there's a lot of talk around, just the country and also, too, up in Chicago about the effects of Ben Johnson, what he's been able to kind of do the first couple of weeks of what we've seen, along in the season. And I'm going to start on the defensive side, man. This defense is hot-ass garbage. Now, Dennis Allen, former head coach of the New Orleans Saints, he's been a defensive coordinator, before that. We've got some talent on the defensive end, but it just seemed like whatever he preaching or whatever he coaching up at Hallis Hall is just not working so far through the first 2 weeks of the season. We got Jalen Johnson out, Pro Bowl corner, all-pro corner, and his effect or him not being on the field has definitely affected this football club. But it's no excuse, because we're not getting any pressure, not really getting to the quarterback at all. It seemed like last week we just let go of the rope. Jared Goff threw 5 touchdowns. Ron St. Brown had 3 of those touchdowns. And so I was a little hot and bothered just from the defensive effort. Obviously, it's a tough situation going in Detroit trying to win a football game, especially when they're a desperate football team, too, being 0-1 on the year. But I just thought we'd get a better performance out of my Bears. But let's talk about week number 3 with these Cowboys, man. Dak Prescott's playing some good football. Dallas, they've showed a little bit on the offensive side. Their defense is hot-ass garbage as well. Dallas in this game is a 1.5-point favorite. That really means to me is that even experts don't know which team we gonna get. Man, my Bears, man. Yeah, man, you can call me a homer, man. I think my Bears pull this one out, man. I think we pull this one out. I think that the Bears now, they know what they need to do from a standpoint of, hey, you're just not going to come out in the first 2 weeks and just get you a victory just because you got a new head coach and some new talent. You got to roll up the sleeves. I think the Bears have learned. They definitely going to play with a sense of urgency. I think Caleb Williams has grown through the first couple of weeks of the year for me. So I'm not going to throw no shade on Caleb Williams. I think he will have a better football game this week because the Dallas Cowboys defense is hot-ass garbage. Shout out to Roma Doomsday. Had a great week last week. I think we see a little bit more of Luther Burden in this game. I think obviously we're going to see some DJ Moore. We're going to see some more of the tight ends play, I believe, with Colston Loveland. So I think the Bears will be a little bit more creative on the offensive side, and I just don't see the defense giving up 50 points than back-to-back weeks. I got the Bears in this football game, man. I got the Bears winning this one, man. 27-21 Bears at Soldier Field. And we going to get into the Monday night slate. Now, these two teams on Monday night, if you ask a few people, before the season, some people may have predicted this would be a Super Bowl matchup. And I'm talking about the Detroit Lions, man, taking on the Baltimore Ravens. This game will be played up in Baltimore. Lions 1-1 on the year. They was able to bounce back, as I just mentioned, against my Chicago Bears, putting up a 50-piece last week. Much needed for the Detroit Lions, especially after what they looked like in week number 1 against the Green Bay Packers. The Ravens, they're a team that, took an L2 in week number 1 in miraculous fashion, as they was able to get themselves knocked off by the Buffalo Bills. Epic comeback fashion for the Buffalo Bills just in that one. Now, I picked Buffalo to win the game coming into week number 1, so I really wasn't surprised that they won the game. It just was, we all thought that Baltimore had that one in the bag. Now, both these teams now, man, they are hungry and they're thirsty at this point, even though we're early on in the season. because they want to prove a point, especially Baltimore being at home. Jared Goff, had 5 touchdowns last week, so he's definitely on the radar of the Baltimore Ravens defense. The Ravens defense actually played well last week, good out and up in Cleveland. To me, one of those touchdowns that, Flacco had bounced off the hands of a cornerback right into Cedric Tillman in the end zone. So, it's definitely for me. I like what I saw from the Baltimore Ravens defense, even though it was, up against Cleveland. I don't think that the Lions will score 50 piece again. I just think that Lamar Jackson is just that guy. We're going to see a couple special plays. Derrick Henry's going to bounce back, man, in week number 3. I got the Baltimore Ravens winning this game, man. 31-24, Baltimore just in this tilt. And that's my look across week number 3 across the National Football League. You know how we do, man. We get it in, break it down, man. National Football League style, man. But first and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot. Before we get out of here, first and foremost, you can check We On Fire Sports Podcast, the spot on Podbean. Also, too, where all podcasts can be listened to. We also, too, on Facebook, We On Fire Sports Podcast. On Twitter, at We On Fire, Twitter or X, at We On Fire Sports. Also on YouTube, We On Fire Sports Podcast. So, I appreciate you guys, checking in once again. But we going to get into this Big 5, my Big 5 NFL top 5 quarterbacks so far through week number 3. Now, I'm going to just give you guys and set the table for you a little bit on this one. Now, this is not my 5 ironclad in stone quarterbacks in the league. Now, mind you, Joe Burrow just went out with an injury. Joe Burrow unanimously is a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. But my man Joe Cool is banged up right now, so I can't include him on the list. We got a few other quarterbacks that's banged up on the list. Jaden Daniels, as I mentioned earlier, is out on Sunday. The Brock Purdy's of the world is out. So you got guys, banged up a little bit across the National Football League. And so Justin Fields out on Sunday. So with that being said, these are my Big 5 quarterbacks through their play through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. And at number 5, man, we're going to travel down to the Big D. We're going to travel down to Dallas, Texas, and the Dallas Cowboys and Mr. Dak Prescott. Yeah, I got Dak coming in at number 5. Now, do I think that the Dallas Cowboys is going on a Super Bowl run this season? No, I don't. I don't believe that. And no disrespect to the fans out there in Dallas and Cowboy fans across the country. I'm not going there and saying it, with my chest out like that. But what I am saying is that Dak Prescott has been playing some good football this year. I really wasn't worried about the passing offense because of just the talent they had with George Pickens there and CeeDee Lamb there and, Jake Ferguson, the tight end there. So they got some good offensive pieces. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from Dak, being a real leader. He left it on the field in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, even though they came up short. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from Dak. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to stay on this list as we mosey on along through the next couple of weeks of the season. But I am liking what I'm seeing from Dak Prescott. I got Dak coming in at number 5 spot. At number 4, this is a gentleman in the first week of the season. They took it, down to Brazil, lovely Brazil. Los Angeles Chargers took on the Kansas City Chiefs. Chargers was able to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs, and probably one of the best games we've seen from Justin Herbert in his career in the National Football League. And yeah, at number 4, I got Justin Herbert playing some good ball. He's under John Harbaugh. A lot of people believe this season it'll be more or less like last season, where he really threw the ball maybe 20 times a game. They depended on the running game. It was good enough to get them to the playoffs. But we've seen now that Harbaugh took off the training wheels. And it's kind of hard to say training wheels from a guy like Justin Herbert, his outstanding talent. But Harbaugh had him on training wheels a little bit last season. This year, they're able to throw the football. Quentin Johnston has had a good first 2 weeks of the year. Keenan Allen looking like old Keenan Allen. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from this ball club, from the offensive side, especially in the passing game. And I'm loving what I'm seeing from Justin Herbert. I got Justin Herbert coming in at number 4 so far this year. And at number 3. This gentleman, we've seen a lot of this gentleman, whether it be television commercials, whether it be just a casual NFL fan just knowing who this guy is. You know, if he walked to the mall today or shut them all down. This guy's been to numerous Super Bowls, 5 last time I checked. And yeah, I'm talking about Patty Mahomes, man. I got Patty Mahomes coming in at number 3. Now, for Patrick, his offense around him has been nicked up. Travis Kelce, he's on the back 9 of his career. Just Worthy's been out. You got Rashid Rice out for suspension. And so he's been working with less. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from Patrick. I just think that he kind of playing with one hand tied behind his back. We've seen him, run the football a little bit more than what he's used to early on in the season. But Pat's still that guy. Now, most people would have Pat at the number 1, top spot overall as quarterback in the league. But as I mentioned, this is about to play out here through the first 2 weeks of the season. Even though the Chiefs, they are 0-2, I still think Patty deserved to be on the list. I got him coming in at number 3 on the list, right smack in the middle. So it's still room for growth for the Kansas City Chiefs as well as Patrick Mahomes this season. And at number 2, now we get into the upper echelon of, guys who I feel like got an opportunity to win a world championship this season. And ironically, this list kind of leaning towards guys who have never been there before. Guys who also, if you checked out episode 1, I did a big 5 on expectations in the NFL season, who got the most heat on them. And both these gentlemen I got coming up made the list in the 1 and 2 spot on that list also. At number 2, man, we got Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, he's just a sight to see. If I had to pay to watch one quarterback, premium money, just to, sit up close and watch this guy, or watch a quarterback, handle that business and get it in, is Lamar Jackson, man. This guy's exciting. Every time he steps on a football field, you're going to see 1 or 2 plays that just blow your mind. The Baltimore Ravens, they got unfinished business. They lost in week number 1. We all seen what it was for the Bills being able to come back on them and knock them off. But he's been playing some good football. Had 4 touchdowns, last week against the Cleveland Browns. They rival in that AFC North. Lamar's healthy. He's looking good out there. I'm liking what I'm seeing out there. I think this team could learn from that setback in week number 1, because I got the Baltimore Ravens winning the Super Bowl this year on the prediction side of things. And so we'll see what it do. But so far, I'm loving what I'm seeing from Lamar. I got him checking in at number 2. And at number 1 on this list, man, this is a gentleman, he's getting his commercials on as well. The fan base love this guy. Shout out to the Bills Mafia. Yeah, you know what it is, Mr. Josh Allen. We just seen him do work last night, man, knocking off the Miami Dolphins. A couple touchdowns in the game for young Josh, doing what he do as always. It's unfinished business just like Lamar. This is a gentleman that's never been to a Super Bowl. We've seen them flame out in the playoffs the last couple of years, but he's the guy probably of the premium sector of quarterbacks working with less as far as overall talent is concerned, and the man puts the cape on every single week. I got Josh coming in at number 1, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I still think Mahomes still got the belt as the best quarterback in the league, just simply based on the fact of the other gentlemen that you think probably are better than him or you might put on the list. They've never been to a Super Bowl. This guy's been to 5. So, Josh, no stain on Josh, man, through week number 2 so far in the NFL season on this big 5. I got young Josh Allen coming in at number 1. So, that's the list. That's what it do for the big 5 NFL quarterbacks I got. We'll come back and circle back in this maybe about another, week or 2 just to see if some of these gentlemen can stay on the list, and we'll see who else can get on the list so far. It's been a good NFL season. Been enjoying it. And that's all, folks. We're going to get up out of here, man. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Let your head down, man. Be safe. Definitely get some R&R time in with the family or however or whatever you do. And so we'll definitely be checking you guys out coming at the top of the week. Can't forget about also college football on the slate as well. It's kind of died down a little bit as far as the supreme matchups. But one matchup I'm looking forward to and will be watching on Saturday is my Illinois Fighting Illini taking on the Indiana Hoosiers Big Ten matchup. I'm going to be checking that out. But once again, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. Wow.